Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I am so glad you're here, and I am so super excited to talk about this message today in particular. So it is a near and dear topic on my heart. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you are overwhelmed and or you think you will be soon. Or if you know anybody who is, and you want to help them through, well, then this message today is perfect for you. And all of those who are out in Facebook land, I see some of your names there. Carolyn, good to see you, and Holly, and others. So Richard, so glad you guys are watching, and I want you to know I'm trekking with you too, okay? So I'm not leaving you abandoned. But if you would like to overcome overwhelm, most of you know that I own a coaching company, the Chad Earhart Coaching Company. But most of you probably didn't realize what I actually do. Okay? And so, just so you know, I'm not accepting any clients today, so you're at peace here, okay? But I do want you to hear what this message is. This is a new talk for me in my business world. And I think it will be very helpful to you today. So what I do is I help people break free of help them overcome overwhelm and like places where they're stuck, and I help them accomplish what they really want in their life. That's what I do, okay? And one of the ways that I do that is through what is called a quiz, and it's online, and I go out to certain groups of people, and presently I'm working with mainly physicians and those who are in the medical world, and I will give them a quiz, and this quiz is, what's your overcoming overwhelm blocker? Okay? And then from that, I help them see the four main categories that they feel overwhelmed in, all right? And so here are the four that I typically see. And I say, and I try to make it fun, and if you happen to be an overwhelmed TV doctor, which one would you be? Okay? And so they will pick and choose different things, and then typically there will be one of these four that will pop out for where they are, and it's almost across the board. I mean, there's a percentages of those who are evenly dispersed in where they are in their life of overwhelm, and one of them is who I would call Dr. Uncertainty. You know, this is Dr. Gray. If you've ever seen Gray's Anatomy, and Dr. Gray lives in the gray. She's always kind of feeling like, you know, life is not always black and white, is it? And it can get very unclear. And when you feel unclear about things, it can get very overwhelming. So that's often one category. Another category is what I would call the Dr. Challenge, or Dr. House. Have any of you seen Dr. House? Know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that doctor, brilliant man, but he has challenges in his life. He has physical challenges. He has relational challenges. Nobody seems to like him very well. And he has all of these challenges of helping patients with some of the craziest things that anyone have ever faced. And so he's always trying to figure out solutions to these challenges in his life. So that's another one that people often face. It's like, I have this challenge in my life, and if I could just get past this challenge, if I could figure it out, well then, man, life would be so much better for me. The third one that I often see is what's called Dr. Unbalance. Now, if you may not know this character very well, but this is Dr. Hawkins in a newer show called The Resident, okay? And here's a brilliant doctor. He's a resident. He's kind of a young, up-and-coming doctor, but it's like he knows his stuff, and because of it, he's over-helping a lot. And it causes him to be off balance. He doesn't have a lot of home life, right? It's because he's so caught up in work, right? And so we can do what's called, life-work imbalance, right? And if some people are overwhelmed because of that, maybe that's where you are, right? And then the third one is what's called Dr. Disconnect.
Four?
The fourth, what did I say, 3? The fourth one, right? There's a disconnect going on right here, right now. And we have this disconnect, right? And it's, in this particular case, many of us know that guy, the debonair, Dr. George Clooney. It's not Dr. George Clooney, it's actually Dr. Ross in ER. And this guy's a heartthrob, and he's got lots of relationships, but he's not really connected, right? Not on a deep level with people. And so that is another way that we often get overwhelmed. It's like in our relationships, they're just not working. I want something for somebody. There's expectations, and the expectations are creating this overwhelm because of my role, or because of what my expectations are for myself or another, the expectations of others. So how do I get along with people? Okay? So that would be what I would call the fourth. And so in the middle of that, you need an approach, a solution to when you're feeling overwhelmed. And so I help people through these things. And one of them would be you need clarity, right? If you have uncertainty, you need clarity. And so this is a friend of mine. I'm going to call him Dr. Henry. All right, and Dr. Henry was a friend of mine who got out of medical school, felt like he had to be all about helping with, well, he didn't know what he wanted to do. He thought he was going to have to do education to be able to pay for a whole lot of school loans that he had, okay? So, makes sense, I've got to just do something to pay the bills. And yet what was really on his heart, as we figured out clarity for his life, he really wanted to live in Southern California and start a practice in the middle of Southern California. Which, many of you would say, well, yeah, don't we all, right, or whatever. But he was serious about it. And so he now lives in Southern California, and he's pursuing his dream. He had some clarity. He had, this dream that he had wasn't a fantasy. He thought into exactly how it could happen. And so he started living in Coronado Island in Southern California. And now he continues to just pursue his dream. And I love to hear the updates. And he's telling me about some of the things that are going on in his life. So when you feel uncertain, you can find clarity, right? But you have to pursue that. The other one would be maybe something like you need a solution, right? You've got a challenge in your life. What's the solution? I don't know what the solution is. And so I'm going to call her Sandy. Dr. Sandy was a medical student who flunked her first year of school. And she just lost her dream. She didn't know what she was going to do. And she tried counseling, and she had tried all of these different things. She's not stupid. She's extremely smart. She's doing all this research trying to figure out why she is messing up her tests. And she had test anxiety and some things like that. Well, then she figured out the solution. And I helped her figure and work through it, and now she's a physician. She went from a low GPA to a high GPA to last month she just passed her boards, and now she's working in Utah somewhere. Another one is I'm going to call Jeffrey. And Dr. Jeffrey, some of you will know, all of these people, by the way, have told me that they're more than happy to share their stories, by the way. But Dr. Jeffrey, it's like, he had a lot of things happening in his life throwing off balance. He had a wife die. He had, trying to, all of these things in the back of his head saying you need to be a better doctor than most people around this area. You need to be a caregiver. And he started over-caring, right? And so what happened is, in that, it's like, it caused him to be off-balanced and to burn out, okay? Or to get close to burnout. So he needed balance, right? That's what we needed, balance. Now, there's no such thing as perfect balance, but it's moving in a direction where at least you're not, like, overwhelmed. The next one, I guess I would say, I'm going to call Nurse Jenny. And I put a little question mark there because it's like, I would love to see your face here as well. I would love for you, just like I think God wants for you, and be patient here. We're going to get into the text here in a little bit, and we're going to move. What I want to see is you move like Jenny's got this relationship problem. In her case, it was a son, and she's just not connecting with her son. And every time she tries to talk to him, he gets angry and volatile. And it's like, there's got to be a different way. And so she figured out a different way, and she said, and I just celebrated with her for the first time when she said, my son came and visited for a whole week, and we never got angry once with each other. It's like, oh, I love that. I love to see people get past their overwhelm. So I want you to imagine for a second, because I really think God doesn't want us to feel overwhelmed. He's come to bring light to your life, not heavy. And we sometimes don't realize that. And if there is heavy, it's usually a reason for it, okay? So I want you to imagine, like, if you had clarity. Imagine if you knew what your purpose was, and your plan, and your path, and was at the right pace. Imagine if you had a solution to those challenges in your life. Like, if you were, whatever that biggest challenge is in your life right now, how would life be different if you had a solution to that thing in your life right now? Or imagine if you had balance. Like it's not all, you're not like, most of us would be tend towards the work side, right? It's like I'm overwhelmed with burden and work and all of these things, and I'm not giving myself the time I need, or I'm not giving my family the time they need. Imagine what that would be like. Or imagine if I call them relationships. Imagine if you've gone beyond just a connection to a real relationship with the people in your life. Okay? Imagine what that would be like. And how would life be different because of it? Well, I could name all kinds of people in the Bible who have gone through different things. And the one I'm going to camp on today, and I want you to, let's go back and look at, is the life of Moses. And the life of Moses is very fascinating to him. He's a great person of character in the Bible, and yet he was a person who experienced overwhelm on a regular basis. And I think we can learn some things from him, okay? And so what I want you to see is that overwhelm is not prejudice. It's not prejudice for the kind of person you are. It doesn't care how much money you make. It doesn't care how good of an education, how smart you are. Overwhelm isn't about that. It's not about how successful you are or not successful you are. The life of Moses is pretty fascinating, because Moses, if you remember, he was born in stress. Do you remember? He was born not being very successful. Every Hebrew boy was to be killed when Moses was born. And I think sometimes, whether we're aware of it or not, what we are born into gets stuck in our unconscious mind, and it creates certain amounts of angst during certain pressures, whether we're aware of it or not. And so he grew up in a very violent, stressful culture of genocide, is where Moses grew up. And then because of it, it caused him to become a person who wanted to alleviate injustice in his world. And he wanted to be a leader that create. It's what I would say most leaders have, is what's called holy discontentedness. So it's that thing in your life where you feel like, this just isn't right. Someone's got to do something about it. And that's what happened with Moses. Moses said, this just isn't right. I'm growing up. He was saved and was put in the king's palace, and he grew up a foreigner. And he felt like what it was like to feel like a foreigner. And he was just like, this just shouldn't be how this feels like. And so he would grow up to a point where he would fight for racial injustice. And then there was a point in his life where he had a major failure. And because of the system and because of the authorities, he would attack one particular guy, and he would die because of him. And so he would become a man on the run. That's stressful. That's overwhelming, isn't it? If you were in that kind of experience. And then later he would hide away from, try to say, oh fine, I'm just going to avoid all of this because I can't believe the kind of person I am. And he would hide out in a whole different country for many years. He would marry a gal, and this gal didn't believe like he did, which you can imagine home life is stressful too, right? So I just want you to remember, you can have overwhelm, and this is how we usually think overwhelm comes, is because of something that we're not successful in. And so we feel overwhelmed by that. I want it to be successful, and it's not. But you know what? You can also feel overwhelmed because it happens to you when you are successful too, right? So I want you to imagine being successful, because that's what happened to Moses. Moses is now, fast forward to where we're going to spend our time here in a little bit, leading an unwanted people group, millions of people out of a foreign country through the desert to a promised land. And that's where Moses is. And he's a successful leader, but you know how overwhelmed it would be to be Moses in that environment, right? Let me just give you one verse that happened in Numbers 11:11. I won't tell you the whole background story, and I'll let you do that. But Moses asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to deserve this? What have I done to displease you that you would put this burden of all these people on me?" Right? Have you ever felt that way? It's like, I'm trying to do the right things. I'm having some success in that. I'm moving forward, but it's like, wow, I can't believe that it's so hard. And yet, I love this verse, the chapter later. Now, Moses was a very humble man. In fact, he was more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. Isn't that interesting? It's not a lack of character that he has overwhelm in his life. It doesn't matter your character or who you are. Burnout can attack any of us. Any of us. So, Moses in chapter 1 in Exodus 18 is where now I want to spend the rest of our time together. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, and by the way, the father-in-law of Moses, okay, he heard everything that God had done for Moses, all of his successes, and for his people, Israel, and how that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. And after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her. Now, it's at this stage where I go, what? Wait, what just happened there? And I want to know. I read the Bible. Every time I read I'm very curious when I read the Bible. I'm always like, what's going on there? And here I am. It's like, surprises me. Here's this godly man, and he's separated from his family. And I don't know to what degree of separation. We don't know why. Was it the leadership pressure that he sends them away? Was it discouragement that he sends them away? Was it disagreement that he just did not get along with his wife anymore or something? I don't know. What is it? But we have this reason. And verse 3 says that her two sons, one son was named Gershom, for Moses said, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." So we're finding, okay, there was some separation going on, but he had two kids, but then now they're not together. And he said, but he names his kids, and one of them he calls foreigner. And we often name our kids out of the experience and the defining moments that we have. At least through Scripture, you'd find that often. So in other words, like I named my daughter Grace Victoria. Okay? The reason is because there was a time in my life where, man, I was overwhelmed in my life. And I keep trying to trust religion instead of a relationship with Jesus. And when I began to understand it was about a relationship and not religion, God's grace is sufficient for me. I mean, that changed my life. And I'm like, I want to name one of my child that, because I want that for my next generation. I want them to experience that, right? And so here's Moses. I'm a foreigner, and that sticks in your head, right? And I don't want to be a foreigner. I am a foreigner. And you begin to feel that way, and you begin to live out of that. You begin to live out of this place of, I'm not everything I need to be, so I'm going to try to be everything I need to be for everybody else. I'm going to have to be that person. And that's what was happening with Moses, and we'll find that here in a second. The name of his other child was a real positive name. His name was Eliezer, and it's my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. It's like God is my helper. God is my savior. And that was another thing. It's like, God's grace is sufficient, right? Or God is your provider. It's like saying that. And so he recognizes that, and that runs in the back of your head. And sometimes those are good things that run in the back of our head, and sometimes they're not so good. And so your thinking, your inner beliefs are going to run your life. And it's for good or for bad. And they often come out during overwhelmed times. And so God can use all of that. No matter what your circumstance, no matter what your situation is, God can use all of that for good. Remember this verse? And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who loved him and who have been called according to his purpose. Isn't that cool?
Amen.
Isn't that cool? That God can use things for good no matter what. And so I think about these 4 situations that I've learned over time that, at least in the medical world, the 4 categories that people go through is this uncertainty. And during stressful times, it becomes an opportunity for clarity. An opportunity for some clarity of things that feel like, I just don't know, things are not making sense for me right now. Or maybe it's some values that you need some clarification on. When there's a challenge in your life, it's an opportunity to find a solution. Instead of just keep doing this, right? And yet we like to do this because we're comfortable. And then finally it's just, this isn't working anymore, and maybe I should move my head, right? Maybe we should try a different thing, right? But sometimes it takes overwhelm before we finally move and do something different. And then there's this unbalance, and it's just like, this is an opportunity, right? To say, you know what? I see my value clarification needs to be shifted. Because everything is way over here, and there are people calling out over here, and it's not working. This is not working. And it's an opportunity. Another one is this, disconnect. And it's an opportunity. Do you look at the overwhelm as an opportunity to develop better people skills and an opportunity to develop maybe some vulnerability and some humility to try some healthier ways of doing relationships instead of just remaining superficial and trying to cover and carry everything that you're carrying on your own. And so verse 5, we find Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, and they came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. He's like, I'm staying close to the mountain of God, is where he's kind of like, I'm kind of like up on the mountaintop. It's like, but you know what? Sometime you have to come down from that mountain, and you have to face reality. And it's not very fun, but that's where he is, right? And then verse 7, let's see. Oh, by the way, verse 6. So Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. And I always think this is a little funny. Her 2 sons. Yeah, you notice that? Right? It's like, okay, was that a little dig maybe? It's like, you aren't parenting very well right now, right? Your kids doesn't have a father. And I don't know about you, but I would be triggered by that. I would be like, because I want to please my father-in-law. I've always wanted to be that kind of a guy. I remember my father-in-law was a handyman, and he was really good with fixing. He could fix anything. I couldn't fix hardly anything. Always felt like such a loser around my father-in-law because and I always wanted to say, well, I did do this. Look, I made some kind of a birdhouse out of toothpicks or something. I'm just like, I'm tried something, and I want you to see. I just want you to see that because verse 7 is interesting. So Moses, he goes out to meet his father-in-law, and Moses, he doesn't trigger. I'm pretty proud of his awareness and his ability here. Maybe he wanted to, but instead he bows down and he kisses him. And they greet each other. And it's fun to go look at all the different versions, the different translations for this word, because they're all kind of interesting, have their take on it, but it's all pretty superficial, right? It's like, how are you doing? I'm fine. How are you doing? I'm fine, right? Are you really fine right now? Oh no, I'm stressed out because of everything I'm going through right now. But it's like, no, we're fine, right? That's what we say. And then they go into what I would call the tent of vulnerability and honesty. And they don't quite get there yet, but it's going to be a thing where they begin to start opening up and being able to share what's really going on. And I'm proud of Moses, first of all, being able to catch himself and not just get triggered and baited into this whole, you're not being a father thing. And I'm going to be proud of Jethro here in a second as we find him not just, keep pushing, but he does acknowledge Moses and his wins. He acknowledges where Moses is. So let's look at verse 8. Moses tells his father-in-law about everything that the Lord has done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships that they had met along the way. It's like, man, it's like, this is hard. But also how the Lord had saved them. And it's like all these cool things that God had done. He had saved them. You know, it's like, and he recognizes these things. And doesn't stress, that's stress. It starts off with these things. I always wanted, like I said, I always wanted to look good in front of my father-in-law. And so I was, the tensions inside of all that relationship. But Jethro, and we're going to find out, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, but he basically acknowledges all of the wow gods in his life. And he acknowledges all of the yay gods in his life. And there was a whole bunch of them, right? And he was like, and sometimes those are hard to find when you're helping someone through Overwhelm, right? It's because it's all the hardships, it's all the things that's not working in my life. But instead, he's like, no, there's some things working, and I just want to acknowledge that. And good job. You made it was hard for you. You could have easily done this, or maybe you did do this, and that was a bad thing. But you know what? Thank you for being honest with me, right? And so it's trying to find those things that are the yes things. And so Jethro did a good job acknowledging that right there. Verse 13. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as the judge for the people. He's now become not only a leader, but he's now the leader that is trying to make all of the judgments for the people. And they stood around him from morning till evening. No rest for the weary. Verse 14. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?" In verse 15, Moses answered him, "Well, because the people come to me to seek God's will. It's an important task, right? There's a reason why I'm doing this." Verse 16, and whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties, and I inform them of God's decrees and his instructions. It's a good thing that he's doing, right? Yep. If you're a doctor, you would be saying, the reason why I'm overwhelmed is because the people are coming to me for healing. They need healing. If you're a mechanic, it's because people have car problems and I fix them. If you're a mom, kids need fed and clothed, right? I mean, it's like you've got it. There's a reason. Now, every once in a while, and often during times of overwhelm, we stop here and we say, that's a good question. Why am I doing this? Right? It's like, this doesn't make any sense. This is crazy. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And sometimes we slow down and we just think, this doesn't make sense. And that is the place where you have to go from uncertainty to clarity. That's where you begin to say, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? I don't know why I'm not losing weight. Right? You know? And so that's when I suggest that people begin to do what I call the 5 whys to being wise. Okay? So take this as a tip, and you begin to ask yourself, why do I want what I want? Doesn't matter what it is. I want freedom. I want $1 million. I want a nice new house. Why do I want that? And then I want you to ask and answer that. Well, I want $1 million because I want to be able to be free. And that's me to that, right? Well, why do I want to be free? And then you begin to ask why that, and why that, and why that. And before long, you're going to find yourself getting deeper and finding out what your real purpose is behind why you're wanting what you're wanting right now. Okay? Now, first of all, that's a great tip. I think it's going to bring you some clarity. And Moses is like, he's figured this one out already. I'm here for God, right? I mean, it's a good reason, all right? So he's moving forward to it. But what happens in this area is we still need adjustments of clarity. So just because you may have figured out what you want, there are still people who have figured it out, but they're still in overwhelm. And it's because what I would call competing values. In other words, this is important, but this is important. And I don't know which one should win. And so it's what I call competing values. And it looks like my thing didn't work very well there. But what it's supposed to say is, on one hand, I want to lose weight, right? Like the lady that we saw in the earlier picture. But on the other hand, I want to eat what I want to eat, right? Competing values. On one hand, I want to live free. On another hand, you're like, but I also want to live for God. And do those go together? It doesn't feel like it, right? Or maybe it's like, I want to be blessed. I want to be blessed by God. But on the other hand, you may be thinking, I want to be gratefully content. So which is it? Am I being blessed? Or do I need to be content with what I have? Meaning, shut up and don't try to get more. See? See that as a frustration, isn't it? And I live with that tension sometimes of trying to figure out what my competing values are. And so there's always a reason why we do what we do. And for some reason, it's working for us. And the reason why you do what we do, sometimes we do, even when it's wrong, right? There are things that we do that are wrong, but it's working for us, right? And on some level, you have to acknowledge maybe it's not working for you as good as you think. Okay? So, here were Moses' competing values. On one hand, he goes, I want to help others, know God's will, and free people. Good reason. But on the other hand, he's like, but I want some time. I want I don't have any time for myself. And I don't have any time for my family. To the point where he sends them away. Right? Competing values. And it's there that you have to consider that maybe there is a value that becomes a win-win inside your life. So for instance, I think Moses' merging value became, God's will is for me to love me too. I'm supposed to be loving everybody else and caring for everybody else. Maybe I'm supposed to love me too. And so there must be another way. That becomes your solution. There's got to be another way. And so the clarity principle says, do you know your wants and your whys? Because that's where it starts. You need to know what you want. Do you know? Are you clear? And are you clear about why you want what you want? All right, let's go on. Moses' father-in-law, he replies, what you are doing is not good. It's not working for you. And so this is where we come to this point of facing a challenge. And you need to find a solution. You've got to find a solution in your life. You've got to figure out how to break it down until you figure out what a solution is. And usually these two questions are the questions, well, first of all, you have to find a doable process, right? A doable process that works for you. Your way may not work my way. And everybody else is going to tell you their way. But it may not work for you. You're going to have to assess, does that way work for you? The example I usually give on this is if you go to a doctor, they're going to tell you everything that you need to do. And you already know what it is. I already know I'm supposed to eat right. I already know I'm supposed to exercise more. I already know I'm supposed to not do bad things to myself, like smoking and things like that. I already know that, right? But how come I keep doing it? How come I can't figure it out? I'm not, and it's like, and so you start looking at, what do you do? How did you lose 25 pounds? And we start trying to follow everybody else's way. And what we find out is that way doesn't necessarily work for you. And so you've got to ask, first of all, you have to ask a couple of things. And verse 18, he says, you and your people who come to you are going to only wear yourself out. And that work is too heavy for you. It's overwhelming. You can't handle it alone. And so here are the two questions I usually ask. How is that working for you? Got this problem, and the way that you're doing it right now, is it working? Well, if it is, that's great. But if it's not, maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a different way. And then, here's the next question I often ask. And especially, now, actually, as a coach, I usually ask questions to help you think into a better way. I don't give you answers, and people hate that, because people don't like to think. They just want somebody else to tell them how to do it, right? I don't usually do that. But Jethro is not a coach. And he's a caring father-in-law, and he wants to give his advice, okay? And first of all, no, he's earned the right to be heard. I mean, he's been caring for this family, right? He's been listening. He's acknowledging his pain. And I don't know if he said this first or not, but here's what I would have asked first. Can I give you some feedback? Because the reality is you may not want feedback. Isn't that true? There are times in the overwhelm where I'm doing everything I can right now. I just can't handle it emotionally for somebody to give me another piece of advice. And so it's just like, you know what? No, thank you. There are times for that. And there are times where it's like, yeah, I could use some feedback. And so in Moses' case, Jethro begins to tell him what he thinks. He says, listen now to me, and I'm going to give you some advice, and may God be with you. So I hope it's God's thing. I may be wrong, and he'll tell him this again later. You know, do what you think and what God thinks, but don't do necessarily what I think. But he goes, you must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Yes, exactly. You get me. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Okay, here's another way. Teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way that they're to live and how they're to behave. Yes, yes. And then he says, but select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens, and have them serve as judges for the people at all times. Well, that's a different way of thinking. But have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. And that will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. And then verse 23 says, if you do this, and God so commands, right, if it's God's will, then you will be able to stand the strain of your overwhelm. And then all these people, they're going to go home happy too. We just found out a win-win proposition. We just found out where two people we could do things in a different way and where everybody can be happy. And this becomes delegation in his mind. That was the way. And so, you can get stuck in some challenge, but maybe there's a different way. And so, Dr. Sandy, there in the middle, she is, I've done this, I've tried that. I said, well, would you be willing to just try another different approach? And so we tried a different approach, and I began asking her questions until she begins to think, oh, that's when I shut down and stopped thinking in tests. And then what would it look like differently? And how could I begin to think in the middle? How can I be aware before I get triggered and my brain shuts down? How can I be ready for that and think differently about that? And before long, she's like, tests are no problem. I'm aware of it. I figured it out. I figured out a solution that I didn't think was possible. And so at this stage, you can know what you want, but still not get it, yeah? I mean, can't you know, it's like, duh, I know the solution, I know the problem, I just can't figure the solution. And my question would be, is your brain working for you or against you? Does it keep on causing you to do the same things over and over again, expecting different results, right? That's what we call insanity, right? It's because it's like you get triggered and you're overwhelmed and you just, I've got to, so I call it that, it's like that, that stage of I've got to figure this out. So you go off and run and do the things that you've always done as opposed to trying a different way. I'm not going to go into that story, but an interesting story of figuring out a solution. So here's the solution principle. Am I aware of the beliefs keeping me stuck? And do I have a process that works for me? How could I find that out? How could I get that? You know, maybe we need to find somebody else that's figured it out and check their idea. Or maybe we need to find someone that can help us think into a better way, into better results. So verse 18 then, I want to go back to that. We're going to go back here several times because I think it's interesting. But you and these people come to you will only wear yourself out. Your work is too heavy for you. You can't handle it alone. He is showing him that he is unbalanced in his life. And you're going to have to move from unbalanced to balance. You're going to have to figure out how to change the way that you're doing things so that you're just not continuing to be in unbalance. There is a concept, I'm not going to go into this much, but Parkinson's law basically says that work expands to fill the allocated time. And there was an article written back in 1955 that by the name of Parkinson who shows this, and it's just like, you know, we all say we don't have enough time. We're overwhelmed. That's what we all say, right? I don't have enough time. And yet, everybody has the exact same amount of time as you do. Everybody. We all only have 24 hours. But some people have figured out how to do life differently and still be able to manage it. Doesn't that tick you off? How come they figured it out and I can't figure that out right now? It's frustrating. Well, I'm not going to go into all of this. I'm just going to start by just saying, this is where I often encourage trying to come up with the right big rocks first. You've heard the story, right? It's like, you know, you've got gravel and you've got bigger rocks and you've got the big rocks, right? And what we're told is to put the big rock, you can't put it all in if you put the smaller rocks in first, because the big rocks are going to pop out of the top. And then you didn't get the things that you really wanted in your life, and you're always frustrated. And so you start with the small, right? Or the big. You start with the big rocks first at the bottom. And then you can put in more smaller rocks around it. But it forces you to have to put the things that are most important in your life first. And, you know, that would be my question. Are you aware of what is most important to you? Are you aware of the values that are most important to you? And are you putting those into your life? Are you making time work for you, or is time working against you because you're allowing life to happen as opposed to you to making life happen to what you want? Right? So, you know, how many of us say, well, I don't have time for God? My quiet time. Well, do you put it, is it really that important? Do we put it first? I don't have time for a family. Well, is it in there? I mean, how many of you said, this is my non-negotiable time with my family? You know, or whatever it is. Where do you put the big rock? In your work, all of these things, they're all important. Well, which ones are most important? And so, what does Moses do? He begins to realize, maybe I don't have to solve everybody's problem. Maybe it's just maybe just the things that nobody else can actually figure out. And it was a whole different mind shift for him. I like Matthew 6:33. It says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then all of these things that you worry about will be given to you as well. Put first things first. God says, if you learn to put me first, and you understand what that means, well, then these other things will happen. You know? But if you're just always worried about all these other things, you're never going to find me in the middle of that. One of the tools that I often suggest during this time is what I call 15-minute miracle, or time blocks. And 15-minute miracle works like this. You basically look at every 15 minutes of your life for a week. Ouch, that's hard. I don't have time for that, right? But you look at every 15 minutes of your life, and you begin to realize, wow, I really waste a lot of time on some things. Wow, I watched how much TV? Right? Or ouch, I'm stepping on toes probably on some of that, right? But it's like, do you realize where your time is going? And then the next week, you start saying, you know what? I'm going to start putting things into time where I want it to go. And we call that the 15-minute miracle. So here's my question. Do you prioritize what you really want first? It will help you with overwhelm. Verse 18, I'm going to go back to it one last time here. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourself out, and the work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Alone. I want to focus on that. Verse 24, Moses listens to his father-in-law, and he does everything that he said. And he chooses capable men from all Israel, and he made them leaders of the people and officials over thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. And they served as judges for the people at all times. And the difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. And so this is where we have to move from disconnected to healthy relationships. Because relationships are a part of all of this. This is where we have to say, people are important. You know, this no man is an island thing, right? It's like, I can't do this alone. And yet that's where we tend to be. We tend to be very self-sufficient. We want to be self-sufficient. And we don't want to bother anybody else. And what happens is it keeps us being more and more and more alone. And more and more and more a weight on your own shoulders that you can't handle by yourself. And so, I'm not going to go into some of these tools, but I talk about delegation. We just talked about that, right? Not dumping, but delegation. There's a way to do that. I often talk about backpacks versus refrigerators, meaning, you know, there's a verse in Galatians that talks about two different weight, and backpacks meaning we're all to carry our own backpacks, but you can't carry a refrigerator on your own. You need help with that. It's learning to know the difference. It's learning to set boundaries. Boundaries are healthy, right? It's creating margin in your life instead of never having room, freedom. Now, these are all things I'm talking to myself about. Just want you to know. I struggle with all of these things. I constantly am like, oh, are my values clear and this and that? And especially like margin, I live up to the very last second with things. I'm really terrible creating extra margin. I'm constantly trying to figure out how can I add margin so I can have space. And then the I feel statements versus you are statements. Oh, that's great for relationships, right? It's like, I feel frustrated, as opposed to, you are an idiot. See the difference? And we can talk about those another time. Another thing, do you have mentors? Do you have those people in your life that are saying, here's how to do what you need to know how to do? Who knows how to do what you don't? Who are those people? Paul would say, be as I am, right? Be like me as I follow Christ. You don't follow me when I'm not following Christ, but as I'm following Christ, follow me. You know, I can be a mentor for you in this particular area. We need what I call coaches, which are Jesus asking piercing questions. I love the questions that Jesus asked. Who do you say I am? Do you want to be well? Do you want to be well before he would heal somebody? And why would he ask that question? Isn't that interesting? I like this question. What are you looking for? Great question that he asked. What do you really want? What do you want for your life? Really? Right? And then what I call masterminds, but those are like the 12 disciples. You know, the 12 disciples, they were a cohort that wanted to accomplish some of the similar things. And they were very different from each other, but they all had a common Jesus. And it created some tension, and it created some movement towards growth. And then you need supporters. We all need those kind of people. We need those people in our lives who are our Barnabases. You know, those people in our life who support us and encourage us. So let me just give you a couple of things that we're going to be doing as a church that I think you should encourage and consider in your life. Coming up in November, we have this Storytelling Saturday. And it's a perfect opportunity for you to get in a group of other people who want to find healing and get rid of overwhelm in their life and to figure out some solution to something of their past. And it's this great healing place. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share. It's a very safe place, but it's a great place to get started in considering what mind stuff is keeping me stuck in my past. The second thing I would encourage is getting into some kind of a small group. Right? If you're not in a small group, why are you not in a small group? It's that place where you can find community and support. And not all communities fit for you. Can you find one? And if one doesn't work, you'd find another one where you feel like you're developing relationships, where you can be honest, you can be real, you can get perspective. And then finally, that you can find a few trusted people who can help you consider your wants and your whys. And this is where what I call the relationship principle. And that is, do I connect with others? And do I have the right relationships in my life? And when that happens, I want you to notice what happens here. Verse 27, last verse of chapter 18. Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Now, I can't help but wonder what was going on in that. First of all, I think it's interesting that Jethro stayed long enough to, I think, mentor Moses. Did you notice? He helped him until he figured out all those things. Didn't just leave him there. Second thing I saw is that Moses sends Jethro away without his family. His family stays. I think Moses is a happier guy. I think he's a less overwhelmed guy. And then thirdly, I think Jethro returns home. And I can't help but think he probably returned to maybe 9 holes of golf. He's not with all the grandkids and trying to take care of all these other things and trying to care for daughter. When you begin to move forward this way, everybody begins to live happily ever after. And that leads me to asking you, if you don't know Jesus, why? I grew up, as I mentioned, in a very religious family. I knew Jesus, sort of. But I thought Jesus was about trying to put more weight on my life instead of less weight. I thought Jesus was about creating structures of morality that created a straitjacket of rules that I could not live up to. Until I began to read the Bible. And I found out that God is not that way. I learned that Jesus says he came for freedom, to set us free. And I began to say, what's wrong with me? Instead of what's wrong with God. I came across this verse. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and I'm humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Let's pray. Great God, I'm always amazed that when I do my way without you, how heavier life gets. when I slow down enough to connect with you, develop a relationship with you, my soul takes a deep breath. My spirit begins to feel at peace. And I begin to experience a more joy-filled, happier life. God, my prayer for everyone that is able to hear this message today is that they, first and foremost, would be able to experience what I've been able to experience, and that is a real relationship with you, the God of the universe, where we are able to move forward instead of just me. We, not me. Thank you, Lord, for your grace, the grace of Jesus, that allows me to have a real relationship with you, the creator of the universe. God, open our ears to hear what you wanted us to hear today. Help us to now take a step, one step forward this week, today, that would lead us to peace. In Jesus' name, amen.